Sorry. All right, we'll start again. So this is a site plan from Princeton that we're going to review this evening. I'm going to give just a little background on the site. The project is a mixed-use project with education, residential, and office use. The proposed development consists of a multi-purpose building community center with 350-foot seating, 3 residential buildings, pedestrian walkway, a new access drive, and some parking lot areas. The applicant is a 10-acre foundation. They actually have a site. They actually have, let me just hold one second here. I'm trying to get a spotlight here. There we go. On this site, here's the map of where the project is going to take place. Is in this little green area. This 10-acre actually over here. Let me enlarge this a little bit here so you can see it a little better. This lot over here, they actually have a campus over here where they have a Christian Science nursing care facility and a school for Christian Science nursing. So they want to expand. They wanted to expand their into this area here for some additional housing for visitors and for educational purposes. So we're going to get into some questions there now that I'm going to ask, and I'm going to kind of move you around on this map so we can try to answer those questions. So when I pose the questions, if you can answer them, please just kind of unmute yourselves and step up with the answers. First question is, over here on the right-hand side, it tells you what the lot is. So I'm going to ask is the proposed project consistent with the R1 zoning designation? Because this is a residential 1 zoning designation. So based on what's here, can anyone answer that question? Would this be appropriate development for this zoning area? Any takers?
Yeah. You said it was supposed to be cottages and like an office building that they wanted to put up?
Yeah, cottages, office building, and a multi-purpose building for like educational purposes. And they are considered a place of worship.
They are. Okay,
yeah.
That's what I was going to comment on.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, they are considered a place of worship. It's Christian Science, so so as you can see here, it's zoned R1, which is residential, but a place of worship is a conditional use based on their ordinance. So it is an appropriate development that it would be accepted for this particular zoning. So that is the answer there. I'm going to kind of scroll back out here a little bit so we can move over to the map portion. This isn't a very good map, and I'm going to show you an aerial view in 1 minute. But the next question would be is to look at the map. Is there any do you see any environmental concerns that are actually outside of where the proposed development is actually going to take place? And I do have this little bit color coded to make it a little easier for you. So I'm going to kind of scroll in. If you see me going towards the screen, because I have a touch screen, so it's easier for me to kind of enlarge things using my hands. But so there are, is there features outside of the lot that you can see that might be, you want to take in consideration with environmental concerns outside the property? Does anybody have any?
It's in a watershed of some kind, riparian buffers.
Yes, exactly.
Erosion. So they're very close to a creek. Will there be pollution? Will there be sediment coming off of the development?
Yeah, all good points. Yes, and in fact, there is some, you wouldn't know this, we're just looking at the site plan, but these tributaries, this tributary, the Stony Brook tributary here, and this Mountain Brook tributary, they actually both flow, although I don't have it completely shown here, but both of these tributaries actually flow into a C1 waterway, which is a protected waterway, so you don't want any additional pollution going to. So that is a concern. It's actually absolutely correct on that. So you want to, look to see if there are C1 waterways in the area, because C1 waterways constitute, then you need to have actually a 300-foot buffer around waterways that are considered C1 waterways, the waterway itself and tributaries to that waterway. So once we get in a little deeper into the plan, you want to make sure that there actually is that 300-foot buffer around these waterways.
So is there a legend that shows, is there a legend that shows the scale of this, so that we know how
Yes.
close that is to the
Well,
waterways?
Maybe not on this particular map, because this is just the cover sheet, but when you get farther into the site plan, there are scales there. But see, the waterways themselves are actually outside of the proposed area. So this is something that you probably would have to go to an online map, because the site plan itself is only going to specifically look at what's happening in the development area itself, which is inside the green area. These waterways are outside of that property. So this is something, we see that on the overview, but that's something you probably want to look at in more detail on your own by looking at maybe online mapping or other sources that may not be actually in the site plan itself. Okay, so next question. Let's see if I can move over here. Okay, so this is the area where it shows what the ordinances in your town require, what the existing conditions are, and what the proposed conditions are. So is there anything here where you see that would institute that might be looking for a variance for the requirements by ordinance? And again, I made this a little easier because I highlight some of the areas. So if there's anything that you see that this,
Parking is a big thing.
yes, exactly, correct. Right here, I'm parking. Actually, there's a little asterisk there. So the required by ordinance, based on what they're proposing in this development, they need 136 spots. They're only proposing actually to have 55. So they actually are requesting a variance for this, and they actually were granted this. And primarily why they were granted is because the parking there, because it's like temporary housing there, so they're not going to require as much parking area. Plus, as I mentioned before, they do have a campus right across the street where they have additional parking there, and they would going to supply transportation back and forth to this location if there's more people that are going to be going to the all-purpose building for an event. So they don't necessarily have to have all the parking on site because of the campus that they have across the street. So they have been granted a variance because of that reason. Okay, the other
Randy?
thing, yes.
So when it comes to variances, if that amount of space says you can have as many as 136 parking spaces, but they only want 55, does that mean that it seems to me that a variance should state the ordinance should state the maximum, like meaning you can't have more than 136. Why would you need a variance to have less?
You need, because you require 136. That's the minimum. That 136 is a minimum requirement for this for this development. To have they're having the cottages. I think there is 14 apartments that are being there. Plus, because you're having a 350 seat multi-purpose building built, so there might be up to 350 people that are going to that. You are requiring a minimum of 136, but they're only putting in 55. So that 136 is not the maximum number.
Oh,
That's the minimum.
but still, it seems odd that somebody would require a variance to put in less, meaning to cover
because
up
because
less.
they feel that you can need more parking. If you're going to have 350 people attending an event and you only have 55 spots for them to park at, that's going to be a problem.
Right.
So that's why that's why the minimum amount is 136 based on the zoning of this area and what they're putting in there. But because they have available parking somewhere else that they can get people to the site without easily, they were allowed to have this variance because of that. Okay, so the other thing that you want to look at here is also what the impervious cover is. This is the maximum allowed by the ordinance, would be 50%, which seems to me a lot to have impervious. Currently, there's only 2.39% is existing, and they're going to increase it up to 6%. So they're increasing the impervious area, but not by a lot, and there's definitely within the ordinance requirements here. Okay, going on to the next thing. All right, let's see, it's hard to do this. Michelle was supposed to be here asking the questions, so I'm trying to both maneuver this and ask the questions at the same time, because she somehow got kicked out of the session. Anyways, the other thing you want to look at is have all the permits, required, been obtained. Now, it's usually on the cover page. There are somewhere on here where it shows where the what permits they have they need and have gotten. On this particular plan, it actually doesn't have that, because usually there's somewhere in the general notes that shows what permits they're going for and what ones they have required. So this is something you probably want to have to ask the developer, because if there are wetlands there, they're probably going to have to get some state permits to be able to do the development, and it's actually not indicated on this particular plan itself. The other thing I wanted to point out is, come on, my it's scrolling for me for some reason. Let's see if I can do this way. All right, is that we did mention that looks like there are possible wetlands in the stream buffer here. So there does look like they did get a letter of interpretation. It's been verified by the DEP for the wetland boundaries for the lots that actually are alongside of the property, which I actually highlighted here in red. So they do have that already in place, so they're good there. They are a little dated, so they might ask the DEP to go back out and verify that, because this application came in 2021, and these boundaries were verified back in 2018 and 2019. So this is something you might want to verify with have the DEP actually verify those freshwater wetland boundaries. Okay, so that's basically on the main page, and you can see on the bottom here, there are a lot of different sheets that are part of this plan. We're not going to look at all of them. I've selected a few of them that we're going to kind of look at in a little bit more detail, just to give you an idea of what you need to go through during a site plan review. All right, so I'm just going to show you this. This is the actual aerial views. It looks a little bit of a better overhead view of what the site actually looks like now. There's a solar array as part of the property. There's an existing building here, a garage. Here's the driveway coming in, and there is an existing already fire retention basin that's part of the property. So this gives you an idea of what is currently at the site. So there's just kind of visual for you to see. Okay, let's go on to the next page. I have to move my questions here. Here we go. All right. I made this a little easier just for tonight's review, as I tried to color code this property. This is actually the tree removal and demolition plan, but it also shows what the existing conditions of the site are. And I'll give you the color coding is that yellow are wetlands areas, blue is a bioretention basin. So the first question is, are there fish water wetlands on the property? This should be a pretty easy question, since I just gave you the color coding. Yes, there are. Yes, all the yellow area. So the wetland on the bottom part of the property here, and up on the northwest and the north part of the property here. So let me just kind of scroll in a little bit more here. So you can see this is the wetland area. And as I discussed in the presentation, there should be a 50-foot transition area, which is shown here. So this line here is the transition area, and there's a 50-foot transition area between the wetland and the it's designated right here, which should be along all freshwater wetland. So that is that's state regulation. As I said, that's determined. DP determines the wetland, ordinances. Municipality cannot make their own wetland ordinances. Okay, so let me go to the top part of the property here. If I can, come on, scroll. My mouse is not working for some reason. You have to just be a little patient with me. It's a little difficult to maneuver around these maps. So what the other thing is up here, and I already kind of gave this answer away. There is a marking here that's a riparian buffer zone. It's a 300-foot riparian buffer zone. And what would constitute needing a 300-foot riparian buffer zone? I think I already kind of gave it away in the initial
Yeah, the
front pages.
C1.
The wetlands.
No, not the wetlands, it's the C1 waterways.
The
would be-
C1
Yeah,
waterway.
yeah, you need to have a 300-foot riparian buffer. Most waterways, like a normal waterway, you need a 50-foot buffer. If it's an exceptional waterway, then 150. But if it's a C1 waterway, you actually need a 300-foot riparian zone. This, this should be part of your ordinances also, especially if you have a riparian protection ordinance. It should be stated in there. But these are state regulations also.
Can I ask a
Okay.
quick question? Will the site plan indicate on it? I'm totally new to this. I just joined the Environmental Commission like 2 months
Hey,
ago.
the only time I do site plan reviews is when I'm presenting this. So I'm not that familiar with them either. So, but go ahead.
Do they normally indicate on them, oh, here's a wetland, here's a C1 category, or do you
Yes.
have to know that those things exist?
No, it should be on the plan. They should definitely have them all in the plan. And this is where, like on part of the plan, there should be. Actually, it's not on here. That's weird. Usually on the plan, here's the scale on the bottom, the graphic scale. You asked that before.
Mhm.
But for some reason on this particular sheet, it doesn't have the coding. So there should be somewhere on here that has a box that shows what all the designations mean, but it's actually
Okay.
not on this plan. On this, at least on this
There's
sheet.
no legend, in other words.
There's no legend. There should be a legend on each of the sheets, but there's no legend.
All right, thank you.
It is missing that. So that's a good thing to point. But this particular plan actually, it shows where the trees are going to be removed. One of the ordinances in Princeton, and not all municipalities have this, is they do have a requirement to do a tree inventory as part of the application process. So they did a tree inventory. They have these 60 trees that they inventoried. The X's are where they're actually going to be trees that they're going to be taking down. If there's no X, they're actually going to be keeping them on site, so they'll be protecting them. And because Princeton does have a tree protection ordinance, there is a requirement to replace the trees, and that tree schedule replacement is right here. You can see that based on the Princeton's ordinance, they are required, from the number of trees that they're taking down and the size that they're taking down, they are going to be required to replace 57 of those trees that they have to replace with at least 57 trees. Okay, we already talked about.
So
we already-
Randy,
Yes,
so this block that we're looking at, this replacement tree schedule is a requirement of Princeton. Is the other green block next to it also a requirement of Princeton, or is that something that's just?
no, that's a requirement of Princeton. Princeton Princeton is pretty, I'm not sure why my screen was crooked here, but anyways, Princeton does require to have a tree inventory
Okay.
as part of their application process. And that is unique to Princeton. Not all municipalities require that, but they do have a tree protection ordinance. And as part of their ordinance or tree protection ordinance, they're required to have the applicant do a tree inventory for major developments so that they know what's there and what they're going to be removing. And then there's a calculation to determine how many trees needs to be replaced. So this is why you need to know what your own ordinances are in your own municipality, because they vary widely from, from municipality to municipality. Not all municipalities have a tree protection ordinance requirement.
Yeah,
So-
the reason I ask is because, I mean, I'm used to reading these site plans now for the dredge project that's taking place in Camden County for Newton
Mhm.
Lake and in Sadler's Woods. And they just simply gave us a tree removal plan with X's through the trees. So we're not necessarily sure what the trees are that they're taking out.
Yeah, which is, this is really nice. I mean, Princeton just
Yeah, this
happens
is
to-
very nice.
Yeah, Princeton happens to have a lot of really nice regulations and ordinances that can be used as models to try to implement other places. They are really ahead of the game in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
Okay, we already talked about the letter of so the other question is, what else is on this site that you see that they're actually going to be kind of removing in addition to the trees that are located there? They kind of have it highlighted there in the middle. Is anyone?
Oh, the septic.
The septic, yes.
Yeah.
There's an old septic system that is going to be removed or abandoned, and this kind of indicates to me, like, as you can see, there is piping here that's going to this existing building. So to me, this indicates, and I don't have the background to confirm this or not, but it indicates that currently there's only septic on the site. So which means that if there's only septic being used for this building, that they're going to be now in removing that, they're going to be tying into the regular sanitary system. And it's probably not an issue in this location because it's in a residential area. There's already storm, the sewer system's already there. So they have to just tie in, but you just want to make sure that they're getting all the permits and that's all being done appropriately, because it doesn't appear that there is any sewer system currently on this location. But we're not looking at like out in the rural area where there's a farmland that you're going to have to bring, a system into the site. The system probably already exists out the road. They just need to get the proper tie-in and plumbing and all that to the development that they're going to be proposing. Okay, they're also going to all this other all this area that is tagged here is also where the current paving is, and they're going to be removing all this and putting in a new driveway area. So that's just to note that. All right, let's go on to the next page. This is the kind of the bulk of the site plan, what they're actually proposing to put in. So over here on this part of this plan, they're going to be putting in these 3 cottages right in here, and they are going to be putting in this multi-purpose building right here. This existing building that's going to remain. And then there was a small building here, just that they actually are going to be taking out. Okay, so again, let's go look at the freshwater, the wetlands area, specifically down in this area. And this is something I actually did mention in my talk also. If you're going to be disturbing that transition area, like they're planning to do here, they're putting in this little driveway area, which is going to be for, there's a little insert down here, which is where, like, when they're having deliveries by trucks are going to come in, pull down in here, make their delivery, do a little, 3-point turn and go back out to the main road. So they're not going to be going around the entire property. That's what going to stop to make the deliveries. But this roadway that they're putting in obviously disturbs this transition area. What needs to be done if you're going to be disturbing that transition area? The answers?
Mitigation.
You have to compensate for it, right?
You got to compensate for it. Exactly. Do you see anywhere on this map where they're compensating for the loss of this transition area of this wetland?
They're putting in another,
On the right-hand side where it's blue.
yeah, they're putting in another bio retention system.
That's a
wetlands
bioretention
transition
system.
area?
It is not
Yeah.
compensating for the transition area. You need
No.
to add this transition line that's here. This is all 50 foot, 50 foot, 50 foot. If you're taking away this area, you need to add that transition area somewhere. So this area over here might come 75 foot or whatever is required based on what you're losing here. This wetland transition area should increase somewhere along this wetland to compensate for the loss of it right here. And that's the one thing in this plan that is missing. So that's one thing that, you know, the environmental commissioners reviewing this would ask the developer to add in additional, you know, transition areas so that there wouldn't be any, you know, encroachment or development from a in another area to make up for this loss right here because they're encroaching upon it. That is not on the plan.
Randy, does it have to be in the same plot of land to do the compensation, or can it be somewhere else? I don't understand at all the compensation part.
Well, that's a good question, and I wish I could have had an answer for you because I actually wanted to find out myself. I'm not positive, but nowhere on this site are they increasing this transition area. So over this wetland or this wetland, they're all still the 50-foot transition area. So basically you want to try to protect that wetland more, so there's more of a transition area. So so you're not encroaching, you know, so you're protecting the water quality basically, so you don't want to have, you know, encroachment of development in there. So if you're losing it here, you want to add it somewhere else so that you maintain the same area basically of the transit, even if it's a little, you know, not in exactly the same spot.
So let me ask a question. The
Yes.
roadway that they have indicated there says checkers, so that is grass pavers? So there's
Not
partial-
here, not this part, because this is gonna be the road. I mean, this is for
It
trucks.
it said checkered pavers on the note.
For the, not for this roadway here. This is for the parking area they're putting in permeable.
Oh, no, but here. I see
Yeah,
what
right. Checker block access drive.
you- check.
Check a block. There is, you know, but they're still encroaching upon the wetland area. They're still, you know, I think they still need to compensate because they're putting it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Randy, when you say compensate, in this particular case, nothing is going, it's not like they're adding something to, they're just redrawing a line, which means that nothing can go developed inside that line, but they weren't going to develop anything inside of the line anyway in that area. So how is that? I mean, they're am I right? They would just take that yellow line and redraw it so that it's wider
Yes.
than the 50
Yes.
feet. So in essence, they're getting some paving over that area, but they're just redrawing a line in order to get it approved. So how is that helpful to the environment in terms of mitigating the new impervious surface? Do you understand what I mean?
Right, so you're taking away the protection here, but you're adding the protection over here so that you already.
Right, that's sort of
Yeah.
like, you know, like, so what? Because they're not going to go in there and like plant different plants or anything. They're just redrawing a line on a map, but it's going to look exactly the same. Am I right?
Yes, but if you're mitigating the transition area, you might then require to have additional transitional wetland planting put in
Okay.
another location.
Okay.
That would take.
Yeah, I was wondering what the real world solution for that was, because at first I understood it to just be redrawing a line and don't go inside that line. But if you're just redrawing the line and not doing anything else, that's.
Yeah, you would have to add additional transitional wetland planting
Okay.
over in the other area where you're compensating for the loss of it over here. So that
Okay.
would be part of the requirement to do that. So hope that, as I said, I'm not an expert on this either, so I don't know all the rules and regulations. So there, you know, some of these things I might have to, you know, get back to you on, because I don't do, you know, site plan review on a day-to-day basis. Yes, you have another question? Yes.
I think also the transition line being moved would block them in 10 or 20 years from asking for a permit, like putting a bocce court in that space.
Oh, yeah,
But it-
that's,
Which could happen because they see a nice green area near the housing, they want to put something down there. But
yeah,
now they won't
that's
be
true.
allowed to because it's part of the transition area on record.
Yes, that's true. That is true. Okay, let me see what else is the next thing on here. Now Chris did talk about, and you can't just tell from this particular, looking at this cycle, you don't have all the mathematical equations done, but just looking at where they are putting, all these little blue areas here are new stormwater basins, small stormwater basins that they're going to be putting in. This one is the one that's already existing, so they're putting in 1, 2, 3, 4, plus they're putting in bioretention basins here, which are basically your rain gardens. You're putting a rain garden in here, a rain garden here. Just by looking at this, overall, does it look like, and they're also, the additional thing, they're actually putting in permeable paving parking areas right here, here, there's all the red areas. Just by looking at it, overview, do you think this is probably going to meet the new stormwater regulations that Chris was discussing in his part of his presentation? Any comments? Yes, Karen.
I do, although this map doesn't show like the topography, it's not showing where the flow would be. That I can't make that out on this particular survey where where the water would flow. But it looks like it's
the flow is going to show up on the next page. Actually, it does show the flow. But just looking at the number of locations that they're putting in, do you think that it probably will meet the regulations?
I do.
I think so too, because they're not putting in any one large basin. They're putting a multiple small basins, which, green infrastructure basins, putting in. One thing that you probably want to look at a little bit more detail is how they're actually constructing this, and is there going to be, the correct infiltration and recharge into the ground from the flow that's going in here? Is it going to be able to handle the 2, 10, and 100-year storm? You can't really tell that from this map, so that's something you would have to go into a little bit more detail to make sure that it's actually going to meet those requirements for quality and quantity and recharge that Chris talked about, very quickly, overview in his presentation. I know he went through that very quickly, and there was a lot of information in there, so it's going to take a lot of time to kind of absorb all of that information. But for small scale bioretention systems, you're only allowed to have drainage of 2.5 acres into those small scale infiltration basins. Same with pervious paving systems, as well as rain gardens. And there is definitely, less than 2.5 acres based on what you're looking at here. It's going to be flowing into those particular systems. So I think it does meet those requirements.
They have a green roof too.
Yeah, there's going to be a green roof. So they're putting in a little bit of a green roof over here over the multi-purpose building, which is kind of cool. So they're doing a lot. I think this is one of the reasons I picked this, looked at this plan and say that they're actually doing a lot with a smaller, site that they're doing, not that much building on it, and they're really taking advantage of it and using a lot of best management practices on here using green infrastructure. So it's there's a lot of good things going on in this particular application.
I think Chris would always point out though, the green roof is a really nice cosmetic thing, but doesn't have that much of effect on stormwater runoff.
That's true. It is true.
I'm gonna pitch in real quick. My cousin, her husband he works for Cornell doing environmental work for them, and he said Cornell has done all kinds of things, and they did a green roof for one of the buildings, and he said the amount of cement they had to put into the building just to shore up that green roof was an abomination of cement is a super carbon offloader. And so he said it was just a disaster. It was leaking and it was too heavy, and they had to shore up the foundation with a lot more cement. So he said, personally, I'll never put another green roof on another building again. And I don't think Chris is a huge fan of them either.
Yeah, it might be a little bit different because this is a new building, so they're building it from, they're not trying to retrofit something, so it may have some of those problems you're talking about, but again, this is something you would have to look at the actual design, because this is just an overview, it looks to say, so it's hard to tell exactly from this plan, from this view, exactly how that's going to be being built and what it's going to look like. So until, as I said, we're not looking at the entire plan and all the details of the actual construction. So that's something that, you can look at a little bit more depth. And if we looked at some of the other pages of the site plan, but we're not going to get into all of that right now. The other thing I wanted to point out is, I did mention having a little problems getting this larger here. Did mention the new EV charging station requirement, and that is shown here in purple. So they actually are putting in EV charging stations, and I believe I said that they're putting in 55 parking areas. Some of them is going to be in these permeable parking areas, and then they actually have an overflow parking here, which is just going to be it's just going to be stabilized turf for overflow. But if you look at the total number of parking that is going to be in the permeable parking areas, essentially about half of the spots they are going to be having EV charging stations. So that more than meets the requirement of the DCA ordinance, the state ordinance. So,
Randy?
yes.
I see these little grid-like square things in the bioretention in the basins, the blue-green color. Can you see them? What are they on the legend? Every single bio basin has at least one of those little grids.
But well,
with a pipe coming out of it or something.
You mean over
No, in the blue-green areas.
the blue-green? Oh, these here. That's
Yeah,
that's it. That's where the flow. This is the it's like rocks basically. It's coming in
Oh,
to
okay.
prevent the flow. So that's where the scour part is. So it is the flow is going to be coming in here, but they have basically river walk or whatever to prevent for the flow coming in to reduce the.
Oh, so those other little connected things might be like underground pipes with little
Yes.
with
Yeah, and we're
drains on
gonna
them.
get to that right now. So
Okay.
let's we want to try to finish up in about 10 minutes or so. I didn't realize how late it is, but this is actually shown on the next page here, a lot more detail. And this is where you see the flow. So the flow of the water coming up the building is here. It's going to be piped down
Okay.
here and then into this bioretention here, and
Yeah.
then the outflow from it is if it gets too high, the outflow comes out here, goes down here and out towards the wetland area. So if it does overflow, we have an outflow here. So I'm just going to kind of try to go through this a little quick because I didn't realize how the time on here. But so and you can do that for all the buildings. The flow is going to be coming into these biobasins, and then for this particular, these are the rain gardens, and these rain gardens, there must be an underflow from them. It connects it from one rain garden into the next. And this underflow here and goes out to this bioretention area here and then out, out towards the wetland for overflow. So this is the flow chart that I think that Karen referred to. So it does show where the surface water flow goes, so you can follow it to see where it is. The other thing I want to point out that I marked here are these little brown dots here, and these are where they're actually putting in soil pit testing. And does anyone have an idea why it might be important to have as many soil pit testing throughout the site as it is shown here? Is there any thoughts on that?
Well, for instance,
It has
we
to
rock
infiltrate.
permeability.
The permeability, that's true, and you want to make sure if your feature that you're putting in is actually going to function, that the water is going to flow down, and it also allows you to look at the soil layers to see what types of soils are in there, and get a more detailed analysis of the type of soil at this location. And there is a significant number of them, and they are located in the where they're putting in the retention basins, the rain gardens where they're putting in the parking lot. So it looks pretty good. There are also there's this ribbon drive that they're putting in. So they're actually putting in some soil testing sites in that location also. So that's where the drainage.
So does it indicate where the water table is?
It does not, and that would probably be in part of, that would be probably in one of the stormwater plan itself. It would not necessarily be indicated on the site plan. So there's other documentation you might want to refer to see what that is, because that is definitely important, especially when you're looking at some of these locations. You know, the permeable paving, as Chris mentioned, you need to have at least 2 feet between your underground and the water table for it to be effective. So you do want to look at that information, but that would not necessarily be indicated on the site plan itself. So that's something, additional documentation that you would want to look at when you're doing your site plan review. Okay, another thing that they also do have underneath this ribbon drive that they're putting in. It's going to be grass in the middle here, but in the middle of the grass, there's going to be a piping underneath where water is going to be collected for runoff from the ribbon drive itself. And it itself is also going to be then connected down here, along with the underflow from this particular permeable parking, and it's going to flow out to this bio basin that they put in here. So, they looks like they've done a pretty good job from my layman looking at the point of view on the site plan with regards to the stormwater runoff flow. All right, and then again, this is just the erosion plan. As I said, I just want to quickly touch base on this. They're going to have 2 stockpiles of soil during the excavation. They're putting protectors around the trees that they are keeping on site so that they aren't disturbed during the construction. They're putting in a stabilized construction entrance right here for the vehicles to come in, and a silt fence along the entire property to prevent erosion during the construction itself. Now I'm now going through this pretty quickly here. And then the last piece, really, this is the landscape plan. So down here are the trees that they are actually proposing to be put in the site. So I actually added all of these up, and it comes up to be 109 trees. And I mentioned on the first page that they only were required to put in 57. So they more than compensating the number of trees planting based on the number of trees that they're taking out of the site. So they're actually almost doubling the number of required trees that they're going to be putting on the site. The thing that you want to look at, though, is where the trees are being planted and what types of trees. So, for instance, I had an issue right here. This is a bio basin right here. They're putting a tree in here. What type of tree is it? Based on the legend, which I put up here so I didn't have to scroll back over. It's a bald cypress. Bald cypresses are native. They're a great tree. I don't know if I want them in the middle of my bio basin because they get to be huge. And, down the road, it may affect the ability for this bio basin to actually function if you have a huge tree in the middle of it. So I don't know if I really necessarily want a huge tree in the middle of my bio basin. The same thing over here. There was one other place over here. They're putting in let me get they're putting in right in front of this rain garden, they're putting in a willow oak. I love willow oaks, one of my favorite trees. They get to be huge. They're going to produce a lot of shade. If you're putting in plants in your rain garden here that require sun, that might be a problem. So you need to look at the location where trees are going in and what size they're going to get to upon maturity. And the one thing I did, the one other additional thing I didn't really, that wasn't indicated on these plans is they are putting in these rain gardens, but they didn't put in there what type of plants they're actually putting in the rain gardens. You want to make sure they are the appropriate plants, that you have the wet loving plants at the bottom of the rain garden and, drier, it's going up the slope, plants that will survive on the slope and on the outside. So it's not detailed enough to actually determine if they're going to be putting in the correct planting in these rain gardens, and it's something you'd want to ask the developer. So I went through that last part pretty quickly without asking questions, but I just wanted to try to point some of those things out to
Just a
you.
quick question about the trees, because
Yes.
I would have actually responded maybe a little differently, because what I thought I'd learned is that the larger the tree, the more water that intercepts and infiltrates, and then also evapotranspirates.
That's yeah, that's true. But if you're collecting water in there, and if you're taking up, it's at a certain depth. So if you're going to lose the capacity of the amount of water going into that, that might be an issue. So I mean, it may not be a problem. It's just something to be aware of. And I think some of those trees also were located in areas where there's going to be underground piping. So you want to make sure, if it's a huge tree, it's not going to affect the underground piping that you're putting into for the flow. So, yeah, it just may fill up the basin so that these basins are supposed to be a certain depth. So if you have a huge tree that you may lose that depth to be able
So it's
to
a volume
actually collect
question.
the
Got it.
volume. The volume may be an issue, of collecting the water. So that was my my concern when I saw that there. So it may not be an issue, but it's something just to be aware of. Any other questions or thoughts?
Randy, Cheryl, I have one question. Along the tributaries, would you be looking at the slopes going into those tributaries and what is planted along them? Since they're going to be replacing trees, would that be somewhere they should be looking at?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, you need to, it needs to look at where trees are being put and what varieties are being put. Are they appropriate for the soil conditions, and if they're planting in transition areas, the wetland, making sure they are compatible with those areas.
Randy, where would they document the maintenance plan for all this green infrastructure? Is that part of the site plan, or is that some other document?
It would be another document. Yeah, the site plan, what we're going through is basically just the CAD drawings and stuff. So that would have to be included. There should be a separate maintenance plan provided with the application. So as I said, when I showed that original Princeton application, there's a lot of documents that go into an application process, not just the drawings themselves, which is what only thing we're really focusing on right here. All right. Well, we went through till 8:30 and that's when we went cut off. So I appreciate everyone being here. And this is just like their engineering design, which is just kind of nice and pretty of showing everything that they'll be putting on the site. So I just wanted to show that just for visualization purposes. So have a good night. I hope this was very
You ran that
helpful.
very well. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm
Good to see.
glad. As I said, I'm not an expert on this. It's just, you learn as you go. And you can't always do everything, which is, you have to start somewhere, and sometimes it's easiest to start with just a landscape sheet and then work towards the other pages, which can be a little bit more complicated to review and analyze.
That was really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
yes.
All right. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
All right. I think everyone can leave now. The session's over unless you have any additional questions or anything.
Yeah, Randy, are you guys going to do anything about how to review a warehouse plan? Because I get a lot of questions about warehouses. In New Jersey.
Thanks a lot, Christian.
Chris is
You
causing
guys should
trouble.
do
Here
a
we
workshop
go.
on warehouse. I mean, 2 years ago was Wawa's, but it's warehouses. I mean, could you guys do something about that? I don't know.
We got, you're now privy to Ann Jack and Rutgers After Dark.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I think one of the other places we actually are looking at, I think originally was a warehouse we were looking at, but I decided on this one for this year. But
This is a good choice. It had a lot of good stuff on it. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, I thought that's what I thought. A lot of times we show plans that have everything possible wrong with it, where this one actually had some, some good points on it, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a wetland on there without a buffer on it and stuff. So I mean, it's kind of looking at like, well, is that, what's going on with that? So there's some questions that if I was an environmental commissioner, I would ask a lot of questions about this, but I'd also be pretty excited about the trees they put in, and the stormwater management looked really great to me. So, and the electric
green
charging
roof.
stations are good.
Okay,
Yeah,
folks,
they had a
so
green roof. Yeah, I saw
I
that.
know we geek out on this stuff, but we are past time, so I'm throwing the hook.
Okay.
So
Bye,
thank you
Night,
everybody.
everybody.
Have a good night.
for
Thank
being
you
with
for
us.
being here.
We hope you'll join us tomorrow. This will be on YouTube, and we hope it was helpful. So thanks for staying with us. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody. Thank
All right.
you.
Bye,
Good night.
everybody. Good night.